How to Train Your Dragon is doing super well at the box office, and this is not good news. Lilo and Stitch is also doing very well, and quite similarly, this is not good news. The difference between the two is that the former is getting better reviews than the latter. But that almost doesn't matter because money talks way more. Hello everyone, my name's Aloubell, and let me be upfront with you. I haven't seen either of these movies. I've seen the originals, but not these movies specifically. But for the purposes of this video, that's fine because this isn't a review of said movies. This is me putting things into perspective as well as putting out a call to action. The reason why I haven't seen these movies is because I don't want to support these movies existing. Despite me really wanting to hear the How to Train Your Dragon soundtrack in theaters, since I didn't get the chance to do that the first time around.
But Aloe, you went to see Snow White. How is that any different?
I went for the content, which I could do here, but the only difference is that unlike Snow White, which I knew would do badly money-wise despite my monetary contribution, Lilo and Stitch and How to Train Your Dragon has much less stigma attached to them and had a better chance at making money. And I don't want to contribute to that. I don't want to support these movies existing.
But Aloe, you like Snow White. You also like the live-action Aladdin. You also liked the...
That's because I'm easily entertained. It's also relatively easy for me to find value in something if it meets my own personal criteria. But regardless, that doesn't mean I want them to exist. I even avoid some of the live-action movies because I know I'll end up giving some of them a pass. When I don't want to. Of course, I'd rather have a good time watching something than a bad time, but the fact of the matter is that these movies are harming Hollywood. Animation, especially. Getting straight to the point, these movies doing so well means that they'll only keep making more, which means less opportunities for new stories to be told. Disney has long since lost the motivation to tell good or meaningful stories because of inspiration and innovation and are purely just following the cash. As someone who was born in the early 90s, I consider it a joy and an honor to have been around to experience the Disney Renaissance, The Lion King itself being peak cinema. For the longest time and even beyond the Renaissance, Disney was always trying new things and putting its best foot forward with each project. Even if something didn't do tremendously well, you at least respected what they were trying to do. But if you look throughout the last decade, you'll see original ideas quickly fading out in favor of remakes, prequels, or sequels. The latter two are less insulting because it's at least new ideas with familiar characters in a familiar world, but I'm still craving fully original ideas. If you don't believe me, go back to 2015 and you'll see that if you only take the theatrical releases into consideration, and I'm only including the quote-unquote films released under the main Disney banner, it does not include films produced or released by other existing, defunct, or divested labels or subsidiaries owned by Walt Disney Studios, i.e. Marvel Studios, Lucasfilm, 20th Century Studios, etc., unless they are credited as co-production partners. In other words, if it was produced by and released under the Walt Disney Pictures banner, it counts. The movies must have a worldwide release and not be a documentary like the Disney Nature series. With all of that in mind, and I hope you love talking a bunch of numbers and math, Disney, within the last 10 years, has produced a grand total of 21 new ideas and 29 remakes, prequels, sequels, or spin-offs. These numbers don't sound that bad, as it's almost pretty balanced, while still being in favor of the remakes, etc. But you'll see how ridiculous it is when we only take into account the animated movies, which Disney is most known for, and their remakes / prequels, etc. Within the past 10 years, there have been 24 remakes, sequels, etc., and only 11 original projects. Those numbers seem a bit worse now, don't they? Let's make it even more bleak. Within the past 2 years, if we use the original parameters of every movie under the Disney label, then there were 3 original productions and 8 sequels, remakes, etc. If we're only talking the animated productions and the stories related to them, then in the past 2 years, there were 6 remakes/sequels, etc., and only 2 original movies. I didn't even notice how infrequent the new ideas were until my brother brought it up. This is truly sad. In comparison, let's see how things were between 1994 and 2004. I would do 1995 to 2005, but I wanted an excuse to include The Lion King. So, under the original parameters between 1994 and 2004, there were 67 original productions and only 18 sequels/remakes, etc. We can already see that Disney used to be a lot more ambitious. That's a lot of movies in 10 years, and most of them were original ideas. Were all of the original movies hits? No, but at least they tried new things. Now, taking only the animations and their remakes, prequels, etc. into account, there were 22 movies and only 6 sequels, remakes, yada yada. Without even looking at the percentages, this already seems much more reasonable. Speaking of, let's look at the percentages just so that all of these numbers aren't so overwhelming. Between 1994 and 2004, 79% of the theatrical releases produced under the Walt Disney banner were original projects, unlike 21% of them were remakes, sequels, etc. And even if you only take into account the animated features and their related movies, the ratio is somehow coincidentally the same, with 79% being original movies. This is a good allocation of movies. This is more respectful for sure and a better usage of resources. This is in stark contrast to the last 10 years. 2015 to 2025, where only 42% of the movies were original and 59% were remakes, sequels, etc. The numbers become even more alarming when you only take into account the animated features and their related movies. 69% of them were remakes, sequels, etc., and only 31% were original. In the past 2 years alone, 73 to 75% of the movies were remakes, sequels, etc., with only 25 to 27% original content. These numbers are so bad and backwards. The majority of the movies should not be remakes or spin-offs or what have you. What happened, Disney? You used to be so respected, so respectable, rather, or both. It's both. Disney is not in the predicament it was in during the early days, where they relied solely on their movies' profits to stay afloat. They now own like half the world. They can afford a few hiccups. They can afford experimenting. But no, we're stuck in the dark timeline for mainstream movies. The point I'm trying to make is that because How to Train Your Dragon and Lilo and Stitch are doing so well, we'll probably continue to see this unfortunate trend of banking solely on nostalgia. Many of us had already lost respect for Disney because of their laziness and greed, but to think that DreamWorks would follow suit. And that isn't to say that the workers behind these movies are lazy. No, the animators, actors, directors, writers, musicians, and everyone work super hard, and I'm sure they're putting their all into these productions. It ultimately isn't their fault that these remakes are even being put on the table. It's all corporate. Now, back to DreamWorks. There's a chance that this is just a one-off thing that'll only be done with the Dragons franchise. But you never know. After all, money talks. If it wasn't bad enough knowing that the remakes will continue, even more salt is added to the wound, knowing that both types of remakes will be rewarded. The remakes that are super faithful to the original, and the remakes that make aggravating changes. Look, I'm not saying that remakes can never be done ever, but having remake after sequel, after prequel, after remake is a bit ridiculous. Yeah? Not only are the remakes unnecessary 98% of the time considering the originals exist, the originals, mind you, that are usually pretty timeless, but they're also insulting the medium of animation by implying that live action and photorealism is superior and more mature, which is bogus. Studio Ghibli would like to have a word with anyone with that mindset. And it honestly sucks because so much time and effort is being put into retelling stories we're already familiar with instead of introducing the world to ones that haven't had the chance to be adapted on screen. And while we're on the subject, hey Disney, let me show you something. Trust me, it's pretty cool. You see this building? It's called a library. It's full of hundreds of thousands of these objects called books. Inside of these books are words and pictures that convey information, some of which tell a story. Many of these stories are unknown to the majority of your audience, but if the vastness of the entire library is too overwhelming for you, then let me direct you to the children's section. Here, you'll find many family-friendly stories, especially fairy tales from around the world that you have yet to tackle. Hundreds, if not thousands, in fact. I know this is a lost skill of yours, but you would have to pick up a book and do some reading to get inspiration. I promise you, you'll find something good. Of all the stories you haven't covered, I'm honestly surprised you haven't tackled anything Anansi related or Princess Kaguya. The former is a popular set of stories in some West African cultures, and the latter is a story from Japan. Those are just off the top of my head. There's many, many others. To my lovely audience watching, what stories would you want to see Disney or other family-friendly studios adapt? I'm curious. And speaking of the audience, despite me and many others ranting about the current state of things, the fact of the matter is that, similarly to the popular French show Miraculous Ladybug, these remakes are in fact popular. Like, a lot of people like them. Whether or not these movies will ultimately stand the test of time like the originals remains to be seen. I don't personally think they will, but let's focus on the here and now. I bring up Miraculous, and if you don't know what Miraculous is, all you need to know is that if you look almost anywhere online that talks about Miraculous, you'll see people complain about its writing choices and complaints about the creator and how this overall isn't that great of a show. But despite these loud complaints, the reality is that it's been going on for so long, has a manga, has a semi-theatrical movie, is getting an anime spin-off, has even more seasons on the way, and is just a cultural phenomenon. It's very popular. Many people love it. And so, like Miraculous, the live-action remakes have more fans than haters. They are funding these movies. But it's not just them. People go to hate watch these movies, they go out of curiosity, and others go so that they can review them. If the remakes are to be stopped, or at the very least slowed down, then we need to stop feeding them money. To everyone who is sick of remakes and whose jobs don't rely on making movie reviews, don't go see these movies. I know it's tempting and you're curious, but you're not helping the cause. I wasn't helping either by seeing Snow White, but again, no amount of rewatches could have helped that movie earn back its money. To everyone who genuinely loves these remakes, honestly, more power to you. I can't tell you what to like, but please just hear me out. I understand nostalgia. I understand watching familiar things out of comfort. I too do a version of rewatching things out of comfort instead of watching new things. You know what you like and you stick to it. I respect that. But don't you remember the first time watching your favorite movies? When these stories were new and exciting? Don't you want that again? Aren't you the least bit curious about what new stories are out there?
But Aloe, strictly speaking about Disney, they have tried a few new things recently and they didn't go well. Those movies sucked and they lost money. Isn't it better to just stick with what's familiar and what works?
Sure, they had some not great productions, but that doesn't mean that they should give up altogether. Like I said, they have enough of a financial cushion to fail a few times and get back on their feet again. Can you honestly say you're okay with time and effort and resources and money being put into retelling the same stories over again? Wouldn't it be better to make new classics? Do you really want to add to the narrative that animation is a lesser medium than live action? Don't you crave what Disney used to have? I know it's easier to just sit back and accept what's happening and enjoy what you're given, but don't you deserve better? Doesn't the next generation? If you honestly don't care, then okay, I guess. If this is how things will be and the remakes and sequels continue, then whatever, I suppose. After all, that's the trajectory that things seem to be heading in. At the very least, there's still indie animation. There's still anime. There's still the original movies. There are still books. I'm still disappointed, but c'est la vie. I'll survive. You'll survive. We'll move on one way or another. Disney isn't my entire world. Neither is DreamWorks, nor any studio for that matter. I just wanted to share my thoughts and frustrations. Do any of you share my sentiments? Comment below with the VHS emoji, and don't forget to subscribe and like and all that fun stuff. Socials are in the description. Become a channel member or patron if you want to be cool like these folks. Row 994 and Merely a Cat are especially awesome. But as for now, that's all there is. There isn't any more.